Welcome back. We're live inside this incredible ballroom here at the Eastern Mangroves Hotel. This is Tomo. We're live here for this incredible Sheikh Mansour Festival. And we're now coming towards the end of the first day of this incredible workshop, this discussion. We've got delegates from 46 countries. We've got over 800 delegates. They've had 2 sessions so far, but now we've got what I consider to be a star-studded lineup. Now, you're watching this on TV. You might be watching this on your laptop. It's going live around the world, but wherever you are, you're very, very welcome. The time is in Abu Dhabi is coming up to 3:30 in the afternoon. It's a beautiful day outside, 35 degrees. It's absolutely red hot, and it's beautiful inside as well. Now, you're watching on TV, and that means TV is very important. And so our next discussion point is all about television, the media, the working press. How can jockeys, racing, trainers, owners all work together for the better of the sport? Well, we're about to find out. I'm actually going to come and join them over here. So let's come and join Tomo. And I'm going to hand over to this young man here because he's a man who's worked in public relations and media for many years. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Philip Brannan. Philip.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just very amused to see all the lady jockeys coming in with their Bloomingdale's bags, and they've been shopping in the break. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the third session at this conference, which is already proving to be fascinating, and I'm sure that there is a lot more to come. My name's Philip Brandon, as Tomo said. I run a sports PR and marketing consultancy called Sports Guide in the UK, and I'm delighted to be here this afternoon to moderate this session. Our thanks, of course, to His Highness Sheikh Mansour and to Her Highness Sheikha Fatima Bint Mubarak for their generous patronage, and of course to Lara Sawaya for making it possible for us all to be here this week. A note to, I think a round of applause for Lara Sawaya.
From the panel also.
Thank you for inviting us, Lara. And a note of congratulations to Sami Al-Bouain and Jenny and Aoife. We read recently in the Racing Post that agreement had been reached on standardisation of rules among participating countries at a recent IFAR meeting. Those of you who attended the World Arabian Horse Racing Conference in London, and indeed the same event in France last year, will know that global standardisation of rules was on the agenda at both those events, and the fact that agreement has subsequently been reached following those two events, which are held under the Sheikh Mansour Festival banner, then agreement has been reached, and that's testament, I think, to the power of these occasions. So congratulations once again to Lara and to IFAR. And so to our panel this afternoon. We're going to be discussing a wide-ranging topic. We're going to be looking at PR and media, and in particular, the jockey's role in PR and media. We've got a great panel of experts, all experts in their own fields, to help us through. Liz Price, who we saw expertly moderating our opening session this afternoon, joins us, an international journalist with many years' experience and in a lot of different countries. I've just been hearing about Liz's recent world tour. Tony Smurthwaite started 17 years ago as a reporter on Britain's national daily racing and sports newspaper, The Racing Post, and is now head of news. Sarah Oliver, the chief executive of the Amateur Jockeys Association, whose members are both old and young, and it'll be interesting to find out from Sarah how she advises her members to approach the media. Pat Buckley, a leading figure in racing administration for many years in this region, but a man who brings an unusual insight, a unique insight to this panel, having been thrust into the media spotlight himself at a very young age, not much older than a lot of the apprentices that we have here, when he won the world's most famous steeplechase, the Grand National, at the tender age of 19. Penny Sylvester, a news and sports reporter for ITV television in the UK, and of course Tomo, who we know as our host at these events all around the world, but with a solid journalistic background and a reputation as an interviewer of being completely fearless. If it moves, he'll talk to it. So, ladies and gentlemen, our panel. Well, we're going to talk about media and PR and in racing, and in Arabian racing in particular, and about the role that jockeys can play in promoting the sport. And I think we would all agree that jockeys have a crucial role to play. But I just want to talk a little bit, to start with, about media reporting of Arabian racing. Arabian racing in the United Kingdom is not as prevalent as it is in many of the countries in this region. And so I'd like to start with Tony, British racing's national daily newspaper, The Racing Post. Arabian racing is growing in stature thanks to the races that form part of the Sheikh Mansour Festival and the other initiatives that the Arabian Racing Organisation is conducting. Arabian racing is becoming more prevalent and therefore is worthy of reporting and comment. But that must provide a challenge for you, because space in the newspaper is not infinite. What does Arabian racing need to do in order to claim its fair share of coverage?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to, on behalf of everyone at the Racing Post, a big thank you for the invitation and very best of luck with the rest of the conference. the growth of Arab racing does present us with questions. We are a newspaper, so we have to answer to our readers, first and foremost. And the history of the Racing Post over 26 years is as a trade paper for horse racing, thoroughbred horse racing, and more so a betting enhancement product. So as we speak, we focus very much on thoroughbred racing and betting on thoroughbred racing, and also sports betting. Having said that, we're also a commercial organisation, and we have to find ways to make money. We have to find new business partners. We have to cater for other equine needs on a commercial basis. And at the moment, that's where our interaction with Arabian racing stands. We're kind of on the bridge between, do we work with the Arabian authorities commercially, or do we listen to the needs of our readers, for whom Arab racing is very much a niche product? But we've heard already at the conference that Arab racing is growing and will grow. And Pat, who's been at the equivalent of this conference for the 5 or 6 years it has taken place, has explained how it's grown and grown and grown. So we are receptive, and we listen to the racing authorities, and I think we have done so far.
Well, let's hope that you'll continue to listen, and that the coverage will indeed continue to increase in the Racing Post. Tommy, you've got a comment.
No, I'd just like to say it's thanks to Sheikh Mansour that the actual Arabian cards are actually published in the Racing Post. Without that sponsorship, they wouldn't be there. And I think that's a great initiative. They've been going in now for over a year. So people who read the Racing Post, the turnover, what is it, Tone? About 60, 70,000 average per day, are reading that. And now if we can get those live into the betting shops back in Britain and around the world, I'm certain the exposure will grow and grow. But it's thanks to Sheikh Mansour for that lead. And that's why it's developing.
And that's the commercial partnership that Tony was alluding to. So congratulations on achieving that. So we get the race cards in. Penny Sylvester, ITV news and sports broadcaster. You have a plethora of news stories coming to you. What does racing need to do, and particularly Arabian racing, to attract your attention?
I think I have to put myself in context here first, because my audience is not a racing audience. I'm a mainstream journalist, which means my programme is every day at 6 o'clock, half an hour news magazine programme. So racing has to fight with all the news stories of the day in the area in which I work. The interest that we have is because a place called Lambourne is right in the middle of our transmission area, a racing area, and we obviously have race courses, not least Newbury Racecourse is right in the middle, and that has big association with Arabian horse racing. So I have to make the case for covering a story alongside a fire, the news stories of the day on what will be very small resources. So racing has a big battle to fight, Arabian horse racing in particular, because, as we've just heard, thoroughbred racing is very much where the media are in our country. Having said that, my priority when I'm looking for a story is the story. In other words, it can be an Arab horse, it can be a thoroughbred. If the story is good, I will come and cover that story. And the challenge, I think, from your side of the fence is, how do you connect with the media? How do you make that story you have come to me and allow me to see it?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Where do you get those stories from? Tony Smithwaite sits there as head of news in Canary Wharf at the Racing Post, and he's got reporters at racecourses all over the country and news feeds coming into him. How do the racing stories get to you, or do you look for the racing stories?
All journalists will have their ear to the ground. They'll be looking for stories, in my case, for what affects my audience, which, as I say again, is everybody. We know the Prime Minister lives in my transmission area. We know he watches our programme. So I'm not talking about just people who happen to like racing. And just as an example, perhaps that's the best way to describe, I heard from somebody in the pub about a horse, a thoroughbred, that was running at a racecourse on the south coast of England, and it was running its 100th race. And I thought, well, that's quite interesting. That's an interesting story. And this particular horse loved Fontwell Racecourse. So as a result of that, I made contact with the owner. I made contact with the trainer, a trainer called Brendan Powell. I went and filmed in the yard. I went and filmed with the owner and compiled a 2-minute report that went on our program, which is a big audience. It's the mainstream. It's not a racing audience. It's a massive audience. So for 2 minutes, because I heard something in the pub, I then got a story on air which made a really good story. The same happened with the Arab horses, why I got involved here, because I discovered, how I can't remember, that the Arab Horse Racing Organisation is in Newbury. I didn't know that. And as a result of that, I went and began to make some inquiries and then did a feature about what's the difference between a thoroughbred and an Arab. Most people, my audience, don't know the difference. They don't understand what the difference is, so it's my job to explain to them. And that's about getting more people interested in racing, because when you explain things, you include people rather than exclude them. That's my job to do, and that's how I get my stories. But more should come from the racing industry.
And that's very much a human interest story, and jockeys provide the best human interest stories, Sarah. But are you looking for that coverage by identifying riders who are having their first winner or a significant milestone in their career, to put that information out to the press, or do you rely on the media to pick it up from you?
No, I tend to use Twitter a lot and Facebook, as well as our own website, but primarily Twitter, because it's such a speedy way of getting the news out there and a very simple way of contacting the Racing Post, and also including the jockeys themselves within that link, so that hopefully you get a good reach from your followers and it gets the story out there so fast.
Social media is something that I'd like to talk about at greater length a little bit later on, because obviously it's growing popularity as a source of information. Liz, you're reporting on racing all around the world. We had a brief conversation yesterday, and one of the frustrations that you mentioned to me was language. A story can be as good as it wants, but if you can't articulate it, then you can't report it.
Yes, I mean, it's very true. You sometimes meet people and you can just feel that there's a story there, but then if you don't speak the language, how are you going to, communicate with them? And I think, I never forget when Michael Barcelona won the Derby, which is the biggest race in England. He's 18 and he wins the 20 and he wins the Derby, and he gets interviewed, and obviously the people, what they want to hear is that he's saying, they want him to say, this is the best day of my life, I'm so happy and I thank everyone, and then they approached him and he just went, and you go, it's so sad, because you could make this big story. I mean, obviously, a story was still made out of it because it was just such an unusual event, but it would have been so great if he could have conveyed his feelings about the whole event and what it meant to him. It would have been stronger. The story would have been stronger, I think.
And I know you have travelled with jockeys to host press conferences and to act as the interpreter. Do we need to do a little bit more of that, do you think?
Well, definitely I got to meet the Queen because of that. I was quite happy. So I'm actually quite pleased if they don't learn the language, then I get to meet more people now.
But we've got young people here riding this weekend in the...
Look, Philip, there can be no doubt about it, and I can only repeat it. If you speak several languages, it will open the world to you. It really will, because it will help you to communicate. If you go to a different race course, let's say you get an invitation, let's say you're French, and you get invited to go to Australia. Well, if you can actually tell the trainer, if the trainer can communicate his orders to you, and you understand them, and you can then tell the trainer, I like your horse did that, it opens the world. If you go somewhere, I often have those people come up to me and they say, I would like to use this jockey. But he doesn't speak the language. So how can I put him on my horse? Because I'm not sure that he will understand the instructions. And that's a shame. I really think that's a shame, because there's some very talented people, very talented jockeys all over the world, and they could really be successful in other countries if they spoke language.
Pat, I'm going to come to you in just a moment, but I've got two people here champing at the bit. Tomo, ladies first.
I agree there is a place for that. I would say first, get people talking in their own language first. We don't even get that, where people, the jockeys, the trainers, are able to articulate to us in layman's speak, in language that the non-racing audience can understand. Let's get that right first before we develop. Let's make sure we get people talking to us.
It's absolutely right. I was going to give the example that you know, Ryan Moore, who won the Emirates Melbourne Cup a couple of days ago, has ridden, nearly 20 Group 1s around the world, most successful jockey in the world. He's made, over $15 million in prize money, so a very wealthy young guy. He lives about 400 yards from me in the same village at Newmarket, but he's the worst interviewee in the world. Even when he wins the Derby, he does hardly smiles, and it's very difficult to get things out of him. So a few months ago, he rang me and said, Tom, can you come round? Tell me what I'm doing. What should I do right? So I spent a couple of hours in the kitchen. The kids were running around and all that, and we had a nice cup of coffee. And then the following week, when I interviewed him at the races, he answered 3 words again. And it's very difficult. And yeah, we'd all love to speak 27 different languages, but we've got to get it right. Just say Andy Murray gets beaten 6-love by Djokovic in the Abu Dhabi Open or the Dubai Open. His contract says he still has to come out and talk to the press. Can you imagine me going to the jockey on the red-hot favourite in the Derby who finishes last and say, come on, let's do a 5-minute interview? It wouldn't happen, but it should.
And also, another sporting analogy would be in Formula One, where indeed they have the winner and the 2 runners up there. And I know you've been in sensitive situations where you've had to speak to the guy who's ridden the beaten favourite, and it may have been through his own error that the horse was beaten. And that's a difficult interview to approach. But
it's a new story. It's a story. You talk about a journalist. We want to know why that horse didn't win. We can see, well, the horse got beat a short head, but if there was something sensational, that could be front page news, couldn't it?
But also, let's give people media training. We're talking about suddenly jockeys coming through, they're getting successful. The first experience they have of media is when we're on their case and saying, give me a response. They have no understanding of how we work, what makes us ask the questions we do. The training.
And yet whenever I interviewed Chris McCarron after he won one of the big races, it was such an honour and a privilege to listen to him. All the Americans seem to be so great at interviewees, and whereas English, and I'm just using because I'm English, seem to be a bit reticent. I interviewed Ahmed Al-Sabusi the other day after he won in Tarbes. He was brilliant. He speaks English better than I do, and he was over the moon. And I love talking to the American girls. They offer so much more, and they seem to understand that the PR language, and we're live on TV, it might be a big sponsor watching, and they might say, I want to sponsor that girl, and rightly so.
Well, maybe we'll have an opportunity to discuss whether that is through culture or that's through training. But Pat, you've been operating in this region for many, many years, and I know a lot of the jockeys would look to you as a sort of mentor. Is there any particular advice that you give the jockeys to working with the media out here?
Well, I've given much and many advices over the past, I've been here 25 years, and we do get a large number of different nationalities coming to ride, all with their own ideas, and a lot of the guys, I like to explain to them, if you go before the stewards, for instance, behave yourself, which is not an item that was discussed this morning about training apprentices. Now, I think it's one of the most important things, that the guy can be made to be understood, that he knows what he's saying, that he behaves himself, instead of babbling away and, oh, I got this and I got that. No. I have more time for the guy who comes, please, sir, would you mind giving me a bit of advice, than the fellow who comes, hey, Governor, what have I done wrong again then? You know, it's a different game. And I think that the apprentices, it's one of the things, I'm sure Roger Perham and Chris McCarron, I mean, 2 of the most elegant guys this morning, eloquent, not elegant, well, they were elegant, but eloquent. And I must say this morning also that programme on the apprentices was absolutely the best session I've seen in the past 6 years of any panel. I mean, what an academy those guys would make if they all joined together, right?
Yeah.
You produce work.
But if if I could add something to it, Philip, and to Pat, when we were talking about manners and we talked about Ryan Moore early on. I had an example. Ryan Moore won the French Derby, and I did the press conference afterwards, and he was invited, and the trainer was invited, and the owner was invited, and they were sitting there, and we were doing the press conference, and there were loads of people watching, and I asked Ryan a couple of questions, and then I moved on to the owner, and then suddenly, as the owner was in the middle of talking, Ryan got up and said, "I'm bored." And he walked out, and I stood there and went, yeah. And so how do I explain this to all the people? Because actually in France, the press conferences, they're public, so you've got actually people, normal race goers, because, the professionals, they will all go, yeah, we know what he's like. But those people who have maybe come for the first time to the races, they're, I haven't had to translate what he said. It was pretty embarrassing. So I think,
But
basic.
Philip, can I just say, even in my opinion, the greatest jockey there has ever been was probably, and Tom can back me up, the most difficult man to speak to in standing in the street or on television or anything. And I refer to Lester Piggott.
Yes.
And Lester could tell you how much money you had in your pocket and everything. It didn't come out of here,
True story. When he won the Derby for the last time, I went straight up with the microphone. We're live to about 500 million people worldwide. Yeah. And just as I said, "Lester, what was that like?" and put the microphone up there, it was a very dark day, and there was a flash photographer, and the photographer took the flash, and his horse jumped up in the air. And just as I said, "Lester, what's that like to win a record 9th Derby?" he jumped in the air, and a swear word came out. And thankfully, he had a very good speech impediment. Nobody heard it. True story.
Well, at least Ryan Moore doesn't swear even.
That is true.
But, well, no, because he's not saying anything. But what's coming across, I think, for the jockeys that are here listening to this today, is the value of communication, how important.
I've been in the game for 60 years in all facets, from a stable boy, apprentice jockey, got going, in every angle of it. And I found that communication is the most important thing. You can get away with not having too much ability, but you have to have some ability. But if you can tell the story properly, you get away with a lot more.
Okay, so we accept that. But a question for the panel. Where does the responsibility lie, then, for instilling that into the
his master, whoever his master is, whoever he's going to be apprenticed to.
I'd respect. Yeah, sorry, Pat, to disagree with you. I would respectfully disagree. I think
because the point that I was making to you when we were speaking last night was that some of the jockeys, and we've focused perhaps unfairly on Ryan, but there are many of them that are reluctant to speak to the media, and they will tell you. I've spent 20 years trying to get jockeys out of the weighing room to do various promotional activities and interviews and that sort of thing. And they will tell you, some of them will tell you, that that's not what they signed up to do. When Kieran Fallon started working in a stable at the age of 15, it was because he loved horses and he loved riding, and he wanted to ride winners, and that's what he still wants to do now. He didn't sign up to wearing novelty silks, doing prize draws and broadcast interviews. You disagree with that?
Yeah, I think in Britain especially, it's part of the tradition and culture of the master and serf relationship between the trainer and the jockey. Obviously that has disappeared, but the legacy of it is that tight bond between the trainer and the jockey, and probably still an implicit view that the jockey shouldn't say anything except to the trainer or the owner. Racing has changed, and racing needs to change, and racing needs to have good communicators, and the way to do that is really to oblige or to train jockeys. It's not just jockeys, it's trainers as well. We get as many four-lettered swear words from trainers as we do from jockeys. And I accept what was mentioned in the Racing School's presentation this morning, that the time they have with jockeys is very short. Yes. But without some kind of maybe mandatory training element in the media, and also, and this has been discussed many, many times at the BHA and other levels, a contractual obligation, maybe not in every race, but a Group 1 race or the Grand National, that difficulty will remain.
I have to say, I totally agree with Tony, and we don't have an Australian sitting here on our panel, but I think if there are Australians in the audience, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the conditions, if you have a runner in the Melbourne Cup, is that when you win, you have to, there are certain media obligations that you have to fulfill, and I remember that when Gerald Mosse won the Melbourne Cup on Americane, that him and his trainer had actually flights booked that evening to go back to their respective countries, and they were told by the Australian Jockey Club that they could not go home. And they got a special permission from Hong Kong for Gerald to stay there because he had media obligations, and that did not just finish that day, it went on until it included the next day, and it was just one of the things they had to be there. And after my experience with Ryan Moore, I was in Melbourne 2 days ago when he won the Melbourne Cup, and Ryan Moore was at every press conference, and he didn't say he was bored. You might have thought it. He was there. So if they can do it, you know, I think it can be done anywhere. You know, if it is contractually.
Tom, I just wanted to ask Sarah about that, about how your members would feel about being contractually obliged.
I'm sure that they would be delighted to be interviewed because they don't always get the attention that they deserve, being amateurs as opposed to professionals. But I think it's quite a sensitive area from talking about communication between your jockey and your trainer. You must never forget your owner, without whom you wouldn't have your horse to train or to ride. And therefore, sometimes jockeys are put in quite a difficult position if they're expected by journalists to be giving them information before they've hardly pulled the horse up and certainly not had a chance to feed back to their trainer, let alone talk to their owner. So it makes the press's job very, very easy, of course, when you've got jockeys who are going to be extroverts, but sometimes those jockeys are put in very difficult positions and can actually offend an owner if they're giving information out on their feedback from their race before they've even got back to the unsaddling enclosure.
Tomo, you worked in the UK, you worked for a broadcaster who pioneered in racing, really, those immediate...
I invented the first one.
Breathless hero quotes.
Yeah, that's right. We get the jockeys literally on the horse's back, because once they've got off the horse, they go straight back to the weighing room, and once they're inside the weighing room, all they can do is come out for the presentation, which is wonderful, but that presentation is 5 minutes later. We want them, the breathless hero. We want to know what it's like up there, what it's like scoring the goal in the cup final, whatever. And we can do it. We can smell them, we can feel it. It's good. It's a very good point, though, about the owner. Sometimes we forget the owner. We would work out, say I'm presenting on television, and the horse passes the post. I would know immediately whether we've got a good talker as a trainer, an owner, or a jockey. Is there a good story here? Which one are we going for? Producer, director would say, Tomo, jock, let's go trainer, let's go owner. Is there somebody else involved? That's how we would do it. And I would sort of say, well, listen, if it's, I'm not joking about Ryan Moore, he's a good pal and respect him, greatest jockey in the world. But some might say, well, let's not go for Ryan, let's go for the trainer. John Gosden's a good talker. We know we'll get a good reaction from him and stuff like that. We have a horse running called Tiggy Wiggy, which won the big race at Newmarket a few weeks ago. This is a flying machine, fastest horse in the world. And I went to the owner, because the jockey, Richard Hughes, had gone in. I'd interviewed Richard Hannon. So I went to the owner, and I said, who's this horse named after? He says, it's named after my daughter, because it's the famous TV series. And just then, this gorgeous girl walked on, and I said, is this your daughter? He said, no, it's my wife. But it was a great story. I love it.
Yeah, a little more research needed, perhaps, on that one. Communication is vital. Being able to communicate with the media in sometimes difficult situations is something that the jockeys have to handle.
Yes, what I was meaning, Philip, was not what we're communicating about, is the way they communicate. Yes. They can very well say, if I ask a guy, well, when did you think you'd win? Well, actually, I'd rather speak to the trainer first. It's only manners. But has the guy got that? Has he been taught that? No.
Can I say on that point, what's really important here is that the people you see on television, outside racing, industry leaders, people in commerce, they've had training. These leaders of industry don't suddenly appear and are very eloquent and stay on message. They've all had some sort of media training. So why are you not offering it? Why are the schools, forgive me, I'm not a racing journalist, but why? I agree that actually there's a place where, although in the UK you don't have enough time with the young jockeys, part of that programme for me, from where I'm sitting, should be, here's a half a day of your time, understanding how the media works, what we would like from you, why we're asking the questions. And for me, that's a real challenge for you, but actually the way to go. Nobody in industry suddenly is magical. Ask yourself now, if I came to you because I have my camera here and said, I'd like to do a television interview with you now because you are at this conference and you are contractually obliged to give me one, would your feeling be, good, yes, I'd love to do an interview with you, or would there be a big part of you going, oh, I'm not sure I want to do that? That's what your jockeys are having to do because they haven't had any training. They've been given no guidance in how to deal with the media. That's from my angle.
Well done, Penny. That's exactly what I was getting to.
I can feel from here Dawn Goodfellow of the Northern Racing College shuffling in her seat because I had a conversation with Dawn earlier on today, and media training, there is a session at the Northern Racing College, and I suspect at the British Racing School too, on media awareness, but it sounds as though it could do with being more expansive and go into a little more depth.
But having said that, you have to have a natural gift for communication, don't you? Because in the past, on television, we've seen some disasters with some very successful ex-racing people, ex-jockeys, who've had a go at being TV interviewers or presenters, and it just hasn't worked. So you have to have a natural gift.
But in the course of a media training session, what your job is to do, and what people who are in, I don't know at which level, their job is to identify, of those 6 people who are being trained, 2 of them really are very reluctant participants. They really are uncomfortable, it doesn't work for them, they're not good communicators. We're not all great communicators. So just like Derek was saying, you'd say, actually, we won't go to that one as a go-to person, but there's a good jockey there that will talk and we will go to. And actually, that's what we'd like to think jockeys would end up being, the person that says, I would like to be interviewed, because then I'm appealing directly to the next trainer who wants to take me on, or to the next owner who's watching this thinking, oh, I might get into racing.
Liz, not everybody's a natural communicator. Are we expecting too much of the jockeys who start off as apprentices like the people in this room and ultimately become successful, but don't carry that desire to be a media star with them, just a desire to ride racehorses?
Well, I do actually agree with what Penny said and also what Pat said. I believe obviously there are some people who are more naturally inclined to communicate than others, or who find it easier to talk in front of an audience than others. But I also do believe that a lot can be taught. Really, I've seen it with, as I said, with a young jockey I've looked after. And even though he's still not a brilliant communicator, but he's learned the basics. It's just like when we grow up, you know, our parents teach us how we speak to our elders, how we speak to teachers. I think it can be taught. I think there's not enough support, that I will say, from the people surrounding them. It's no help to have trainers who have the same attitude that they don't want to talk to the press. That is then reflected onto the kids. I think that trainers, obviously because of the sensitivity of the whole subject, and which is again what Sarah was saying, you know, that how much can you divulge, you know, can you talk about, for instance, that a horse is in a yard and you might ask the jockey how's the horse, and the jockey will say, oh, he's actually broken down and the trainer hasn't announced it or something. There is a certain sensitivity that needs to be respected. But I think there's a general training that can be achieved. I think that, because in the end, we just want very simple answers. We don't expect them to be super eloquent or something, but it would just be nice, even if they are on the beaten favorite, that they would just say, look, it didn't work out for me today. Sometimes it's very, very simple simple things that make our life so much easier. Instead of a jockey saying, oh, you know, go away, I don't want to talk to you because you came in last. If we could just tell them that all we really want is just to say, as I said, it didn't work out, or, you know, it is so simple. And I believe that that should be taught, and everyone, even those who can't really communicate, will be able to communicate at least that.
And don't forget that we, whether it's TV, print, or digital, we're really just asking the questions that the readers and the viewers want answered.
But we've spoken earlier on about passion, and that everyone has to have passion for the sport, which we all share, or we wouldn't be here today. If you're one of those people and you're riding as a professional jockey, you're very often not the run-of-the-mill personality. You take your job very, very seriously. You've got a lot of pressure on you. You're riding in a top-class race, maybe. You've got the whole world watching you. You've just got beaten a short head. There's a steward's inquiry. Are you really going to want to come along to a journalist and tell them how you're feeling at that moment?
No.
But it is.
But why not?
It is.
Why?
It is the
I agree
journalist's
with you.
job to
I feel
ask.
awful, but at the same time, you win races, you lose races. You can't play football and score goals every match. I'm with you, and I fully understand. But no, why not?
But
that's our job. We want a reaction. Tony wants a reaction. He wants to write about it the following day, don't you?
Yeah, and to pick up on your point, it's a very strong no at the moment. But if we were in a culture of jockeys expecting to be interviewed or asked after a race, fair enough, if it's immediately after, you might want to give them a bit of slack. But at the minute, we're in an environment where it's almost deemed an intrusion. And all we're really trying to get to is a position where we can inform the viewers or inform the readers. Because if we don't, then we aren't doing our jobs.
Do you know what? And also imagine we've got Wimbledon. I mean, after each tennis match, there is a loser. There's only one winner. He always gets interviewed. Can you imagine that if Federer or Nadal or someone who gets beaten, he then just says to Sue Barker, go away, I don't want to talk to you. You know, it doesn't happen. So why does it not happen in tennis, but why does it happen to us in racing? That is what I don't understand.
Do you know what would be very revealing is if the people at the top of racing, in wherever country where you think this might be an issue, to help your jockeys, is to get the people from the schools, from the BHA, get them into a session of professional media training. And I believe you would see a very different reaction to the idea of giving your young people media training, because it's very, very effective and it might transform.
And I also think if there was an element of contractual obligation or mandatory obligation, a lot of jockeys would train themselves.
Yes.
They wouldn't need the schools to train.
And I think that's what you're saying, that we need to move towards a place where we're creating the expectation. So the jockey might give it a second thought. What am I going to say to the press about this?
There's a very interesting story to give you an example. There's an England rugby match against New Zealand on Saturday. And England have brought in this brand new guy, this incredible player. And 4 weeks ago, they played a match. Leicester, a very good rugby team, against the Army. And this guy played for the Army, which is a very moderate team. And he played absolutely incredible. And now he's in the England team. And when I opened every English newspaper this morning, all the stories about this guy being drafted in, and it's a wonderful story. Wow, reading that over breakfast, isn't that incredible? I would love lots of stories to be coming from this floor. I would love every apprentice jockey who's riding in the race on Sunday to come and say hello to me. 3 or 4 have, hello Tomo, and all the other journalists here who are writing and sending their stories around the world. And all the lady jockeys, did you realize I didn't have a ride until I was 15? You know, and I used to be an ice hockey player like Chris, which I never realized. Stories like that, if you give us the stories, we'll talk about them, we'll print them. And the more you give us, the more we'll give you.
Jockeys, you've been warned. Tomo will be on the prowl on Sunday at the races. We've talked all about verbal communication so far. Sarah, you mentioned communicating by Twitter. That can be a double-edged sword, and we have seen sports personalities, haven't we, Tomo, get in trouble for tweeting. Tony, I noticed that reading the Racing Post, an increasing amount of those quotes are coming from Twitter, and you will acknowledge that a jockey or a trainer has said something either on their website digitally or through Twitter. Has that changed the way that you communicate with jockeys?
Not especially, no. They never answer the phone anyway, Phil. It does make life easier. Obviously, what we want from any participant is their view. And if their view is on Twitter, and it's a valid view, albeit within 140 characters, it gives you a starting point. You still like to speak to them to be more expansive, but obviously within the context of deadlines, that's a starting point. It's very valuable, very valuable.
Liz, Twitter, is it something that you follow to follow jockeys to keep up to date with their movements and their thoughts?
You couldn't have asked the worst person. I'm neither on Facebook nor on Twitter. So no, actually, I don't. But I do know that there have been some seriously, harming messages put out on Twitter. I would advise everyone to be very careful what they put out on Twitter. But I also know that some people hide behind it because they cannot verbally communicate as well as others. And it's their way of maybe announcing that they're not going to ride for a couple of days because, I don't know, they have the flu or they have to go somewhere or something. So it's a good and a bad thing is what I'm trying to say. I think you have to be careful how you use it, but I do believe, especially for some of the younger jockeys, it just, sometimes you don't see a name pop up on the race card and you sort of wonder and you think, where's that jockey or something, and then they just put out a tweet and said, I had to go to my brother's wedding or something like that. And so I do think it helps, but I don't think it's a great communication tool for them.
Well, I just wonder whether we ought to find out, actually, from our jockeys, our apprentices and the lady riders. Hands up, how many are on Twitter? Yeah, see, that's a fair few. Liz Price is not following you, by the way, on Twitter. But it is an increasingly common method. It's
vitally important. I would get 70% of my news on Twitter, wherever it comes from, whether it's racing, football, around the world. 70% would have come on Twitter. I would think Tone would literally live on it to get the news. I heard on Twitter last night that Paul Hannigan, my next-door neighbour, had a fall at Wolverhampton and broken his collarbone. Now, that might have happened too late to get in the papers, etc., but it comes through instantly. You don't wait to read that in the paper. I think it's vitally important. I agree, it's a double-edged sword. Not easy. But 70% of my stories now would come from Twitter. Whenever I'm in the studio, I have that on all the time, just to see if any breaking news, I'll probably get it first out of Twitter.
So, looking at our apprentices and the lady riders and their careers going forward, what piece of advice, Liz, could you offer to them?
Well, I would tell everyone that it's better to communicate than not to say anything. I would say that no matter in what situation you are, let's say if you would ride a really bad race, or it could happen, God forbid, that you clip heels with someone has a fall, and the press comes after you and say, how do you feel about it? I would always tell you to communicate. I would really say this whole no comment or I don't want to talk about it, it doesn't serve you any good, because what it does, the moment you don't communicate, you actually give us, the media, the opportunity to speculate. And that's when we will actually really get interested in something. The more you go into your shell, the less you talk about what is happening in your life, the more suspicious we become, or the more we want to know what is happening. And actually, you're giving us the opportunity to write what we want. And that is not always something that might be in your interest. So if you communicate with us, we can't write anything else, because we are then, more or less, we are obliged to take what you have told us. So really, you are the creator of your own story. and you should never forget that. That is something you control. By what you tell us, that is where we will go. The less you tell us, as I said, we will start writing our own stories, and it can go into a direction which you won't like, or I just really think it's good to communicate. And even, as I said earlier, it is not something, we don't expect everyone to talk for hours or to tell us about your whole life or something. You know, we're simple people. We're easily pleased. Just give us little things, you know, just a little information and we're happy. Just anything, it puts us, you know, we can tell our editor, yeah, we talk to them, that's all good, even if it's just a one-liner, but do communicate. That would be my
I would agree.
message.
There's a skill to develop for all young jockeys that if you get asked a question by a reporter, you can answer it without giving the answer. We are simple.
Don't tell them that.
Because of trade secrets coming out here from the press.
We are human beings, and we can build up a relationship with you. If I ask you a direct question about an injury or about a horse you've been jocked off, you can tell me, I can give you an answer to that, but I'm not ready to give it to you just yet. If you work with me, I can give you the answer. Without a little bit of relationship building or a little bit of communication, your answer would either be no comment, or probably would be no comment. And as Liz says, there are many ways of delivering a no comment without giving a no comment.
And just to look at the more positive side of that, the power of the press. I mean, Liz said you give us an opportunity to write whatever we like if you don't tell us anything. Those riders that are more communicative, I'm thinking of the Racing Post Sunday supplement and the big interview in there. That can be an enormous boost to riders in boosting their profile, raising their profile, and awareness of them among other owners and the racing fraternity generally. So presumably somebody who will work with you on something like that could derive a great deal of benefit from it.
I think everyone, if they were asked, or most people were asked, would you like to do an interview for a national newspaper, they would say yes. And a good example is James Doyle, whose early career was very successful on Al Kazim and others. And obviously his riding talent enabled him to procure the job with Judmont Farms. But equally, an element of it would be his ability to speak clearly and with interest about his rides, not only to the owners on the race day, but in the newspapers as well. And that built a profile of him as a very personable, good communicator, as well as being a good jockey. And I'm sure that would play a part in potential owners giving him a greater value.
Because, and also he's there as a representative of the owner and Prince Khalid Abdullah's stable, and therefore is it seen to be an extension of that team?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, just to rewind to the earlier point, the old master-serf relationship between trainer jockey is kind of fractured a bit because a lot of the big money contracts are now with major ownership stables rather than with trainers. And, you know, jockeys are obviously aware of the boundaries of what they can say because, as we all are, I'm aware of the boundaries of what I can say today about the Racing Post. But within that, they ought to be able to, and they ought to take comfort in having that backup of a major owner to be expansive about their job, hopefully.
Sarah, your advice to these riders, you deal with a lot of young amateur riders, and as I say, your members go all through the age ranks, but to somebody embarking on a riding career now, what would your advice be?
To listen to your successful predecessors and to make the most of every opportunity as soon as you can, so that hopefully you're going to have winners in the future. If you're going to be listening to your guiders along the way, then hopefully with a bit of talent you'll get some success and build on it.
I'd ask you the same question, Pat, but first, what was it like for you when you were thrust into the media spotlight? 1963, you won the Grand National. It wasn't on a particularly favoured horse either. It was a bit of a long price. and a tremendous ride, tremendous experience for you, and then suddenly you're plucked into the media spotlight and you're on the front page of the newspapers. How was that for you as a 19-year-old?
Well, fantastic, really. But I had been plunged into the limelight the year before because I rode the second favourite and went head over heels at the first. So I was mentioned in the media for a couple of days. But in those days also, Philip, you see, the media coverage wasn't anywhere near what it's like now. The television was practically non-existent, you know. Yeah, it was great, and I did Peter O'Sullivan, the greatest journalist who's ever been for racing, with all due respect to anybody here. I mean, he really promoted me, and it was what I think made me, really. It put me in people's minds and got me going. And they still remember that from even now, and that's due to the publicity I received. If I'd ridden the winner and hadn't communicated with the press, etc., etc., there would have been nothing said, and there would have been an article the next day, and that's it, you know.
Yes.
But even you, when you're writing about me now, you still mention the national.
That's true. That's true. Yes. So make the most of your success.
I think for any young apprentice, we're probably talking about older guys here. Ryan Moore. Ryan's established.
Yes.
He doesn't really care whether the journalists like him or not, I'm sure. Though it's preferable that they do. But we're talking about here apprentice training. What I was referring to earlier is teach the apprentices how to behave and how to be nice and how to respect their elders, if you like, which is something that I'm not casting any aspirations on anybody here, but children are not brought up like they used to be brought up. I think you'll concur with that, yeah? And when they go into serving their apprenticeship, or even when they go to the apprentice school, I mean, why are they not taught manners, yeah? Yes, sir, no, sir. Now, my boss was a very, very strict ex-army officer, Captain Neville Crump. Now, if you didn't say sir to every answer or question to him, you got a kick up the backside. Now, and I think nowadays that discipline is missing. Okay, we can't enforce it by the proverbial kick up the bum, but I mean, there are ways of teaching people how to behave yourself. There's no need to be rude. There's no need to be ignorant. Let's be nice about it. Let's be gentle. If Tony Smurthwaite asks you for a quote or a comment or something, say, sorry, Tony, but I must speak to my owner first. Or, conversely, if the owner's happy enough for him to talk, fine.
But manners are at the heart of
redundant
it.
in any walk of life. In any walk of life.
And it's tradition, Tomo, is there was a story about one of your former employees, actually, that springs to mind, who was called before the stewards on a British racecourse in following something to do with the broadcast, and was told to take his hands out of his pockets when he was talking to the steward.
That's true.
You remember? But the point I was making with that is that in British racing, certainly, the jockeys still are required to have that respect for the stewards and for the clerk of the scales as well, to call the clerk of the scales.
Pat is so right. One of my best friends is John Frankham, former champion jockey, multi-millionaire and all that. And the last thing he does at night before he goes to bed, he cleans his shoes. Because when he was an apprentice with Fred Winder, if he turned up with dirty boots, jogger boots in the morning, he wouldn't be allowed to ride, he'd be sent home. And that's why, to this day, even I try and clean my shoes every night. They're still shiny.
You do mine.
I'm not doing yours, Pat. But it is true. It instills that lack of that respect that I think should go. Mind you, I'm very impressed with the apprentices who I've met so far. They're really good and they put themselves forward, which I think they have to be. But that respect, it's so important.
And how do we compare with other sports? You said about penny racing competing with other news items, but in other sports, in your communication with cricketers, footballers, rugby players, how does racing stack up?
Sometimes the perception of trainers can be that they're quite taciturn, maybe quite difficult. Jockeys we don't tend to go to because generally we're looking at the trainer, and if the jockeys aren't being put forward, then we'll go in other routes. So if you're looking for a comparison, I think other sports that we generally deal, mainstream sports, tend to be much more open to talking to the media. And I'm talking again, remember, not about a racing specialist television station. I'm talking about mainstream. So there is work to be done on both sides. I'm not saying racing has the problem. It's coming from both sides. That journalists need to be educated about how racing works and how we can approach people.
Because as a news reporter, racing wouldn't be your specialist subject. So how much help are you looking for from the interviewee?
Completely. You know, the key is you are the experts. When I come and do an interview with anybody, and I've done 3 interviews today, I've relied on you to give me the information because I'm not an expert, and that's absolutely how you get control as well. That's how you as the jockey or the leader of your industry actually has control, because you are ultimately the experts in my field. And in terms of what advice I'd give to apprentice jockeys is, yes, absolutely what Liz was saying, be prepared to communicate. Absolutely what Tony says, there are ways that you can divert the questions. And absolutely here with, you know, learn the right way. And it all comes back to me as a complete outsider that actually what we're all talking about is making sure you have the right training so that when you are put in front of the cameras or in front of a microphone or in front of a journalist with his pen and paper, that you are best equipped to be able to do it. You can't just thrust people in front of the media and say, now it's your turn. You have to give them the help along the way, and that means probably at school, in the programme somewhere to help them.
And the reporters are looking for help, so I think what we can deduce from that is that news reporters are like spiders. They're more scared of you than you are of them. I think, Tom, anything to add to that, Derek?
I just think it's so interesting. It's so interesting listening to all the views, but I want some questions. I think we should. Have we got time for some questions?
We have got time for some questions.
I would
just
love
wanted to know if you had any closing comments while
There's a guy got his hand up already, or he's yawning, or he's stretching. There's a guy there.
Friends,
the Emirates girls are here. The best airline in the world.
We're on mic.
If you could please tell us your name and...
I'm Matty Highland, and I'm an apprentice jockey coach. I was on the session before. But I'd like to commend... I'd like to commend those guys down the end there, because we do deliver at Racing Victoria media training for our apprentices in their first and second year, and it's crucial that they promote their brand, and they promote the brand of racing, and that's why it's so important in Australia that they get an opportunity to get up and put themselves forward, which then helps them get their business. So, good on you.
Thank you.
Keep at it.
Thank you.
More of that.
There's a lot of hands going up for a lot of hands here.
HorseReporter.com
Can I say on that, Phil, what I'd say
here.
is actually what that gentleman's just said is about every interview is actually an opportunity. For everybody that does an interview, it's an opportunity.
Go, go, go. Quick, quick,
Thank you,
quick.
Penny. We'll have
He's had his hand up for an hour.
Okay, Tex Lorena, South Africa. I've seen 2 great jockeys being brothers. The one is the younger one, is the better rider, and the older one was the better talker to the media. Basil Marcus, for 7 years, ran to the press in Hong Kong to speak to them. And I promise you, not that you like to judge who's better than who, but when it comes to riding, the younger one had the edge on him, but didn't have the same marketing skills as the older one did. And as young jockeys, the press is your marketing tool to your future.
And that is very important. That's what we were talking with Tony about the power of the press. And Liz, you would concur with that the media does have an ability to promote and help the careers of riders.
There can be absolutely no doubt. You've got to always remember that, you know, people like Frankie Dettori, who are so much in the limelight, who's probably the only jockey that we have who's really a world, known personality. Part of the reason that he got there is absolutely 99% is talent, but he also has this way that he puts himself forward. And I can just tell you, if you can communicate, part of it is just smiling. Do you know how nice it is when you've won a race and you get off and you smile and you show the world, look, I'm proud that I won this race. You know, I'm really, really proud. This is a great moment for me. That already promotes you, you know, and people will they will go up to you, they will want to talk to you, they will want to be part of you because you are the winner, you smile, you know, you've got joy about you, and so I think, you know, use those opportunities, you know, when the press wants to talk to you, and other people will come towards you. It's just a natural, I don't know, it's a natural occurrence. You just want to be with those people who communicate, who laugh, who, you know, who are in the midst of it.
And as Penny said, every interview is an opportunity.
Yes,
Pamela's got a question, then we have a gentleman over there, and there's a lady at the back who's had her hand up for a long time, so we'll take Pamela first.
Thank you. Pamela Burton, and I'm an equestrian journalist in the United States. And one thing that I don't see or is not represented here is a U.S. journalist. I understand there was someone that was coming but didn't come.
She was invited, but she couldn't come.
Right, but I just want to say that I have interviewed regularly jockeys after races in the U.S., and I don't know if it's different than what you're speaking, but I have not had any problem. They always seem to be quite happy to express something, and I have a couple of questions that enforce an answer, not a yes and no. And usually they're pretty happy to say something. So I'm thinking maybe their experience and encouragement is different. They also seem to make an answer that might get them a job for the next race. I did what the trainer told me to. You know, that sort of thing. They seem to be a little more savvy. And then I've also had trainers that weren't very good talkers, and they have headed me to someone they knew that was. But just one other thing, as a journalist, as a photographer as well, I do want to say it goes just the same as speaking. If your jockey comes out off the horse like Frankie does, or even in the winners coming to be collected by the trainer, a great hand clap, a smile, something that a journalist will take a picture, and that goes on the front page. The one that's slinking in with no smile will never notice. We always go for the color. And so that's something that should be spoken about as well. Be good, be happy, be always be someone that someone wants to take a photo of. Thank you.
It never ceases to amaze me in the UK, in the winner's enclosure, immediately after a race, any race, the photographers have to line up the shot with the winning jockey at the horse's head and the owners. And the photographers always have to ask the jockeys to do it. You'd think by now they'd do it naturally, wouldn't you?
It's incredible, and I think it's strange. There's only one Frankie does it. I mean, his mum was a trapeze artist in the circus, so that's where he gets it from. But it's true. If Frankie does it, it's great. But we try and create an atmosphere. And Pam, you're so right. I love talking to the Americans. We get a response.
But the Americans...
Yes, exactly. Now, where's the next question? The guy at the back.
Is this question going to be in Arabic, sir?
Sorry?
He speaks good English. He's a good lad.
I speak English, but first of all, I would like to excuse you. I would like to ask my question in Arabic. Thank you very much.
Yes.
لا شك أن مهرجان سمو الشيخ منصور بن زايد أحدث تواصل بين الإمارات والعالم وبين العرب والعالم، وها هو اليوم يحدث تواصل هنا في هذه القاعة معكم أنتم، وبخلال المحاضرة الجميلة اللي قدمتوها دي والخبرات الكبيرة اللي قدمتوها دي في مجال الإعلام والتواصل. ومن خلفية أنني إعلامي ومتخصص في الصحافة والاتصال، لا بد قبل أن أطرح السؤال أن أشكر جهود الرائعة جدا وشهادتنا فيها بجروحها لا رسوايا، يعني المجتمع العالمي والعربي بيشهد لها بنشاطها وبالحيوية بتاعتها اللي خلتنا نحن مجتمعين اليوم هنا من خلال المؤتمر هذا. السؤال هو لا شك أن الاتصال مهم جدا ما بين الفارس وما بين الصحفي وما بين الصحفي وأي فئة أخرى، لكن السؤال اللي بيطرح نفسه أليس من الواجب أن يتسلح الصحفي بلغة أو لغتين تساعده على أن يقوم بعمله على أكمل وجه بدلا من أن يرمي اللوم على الفارس؟ يعني مثلا لكي برشلونة لما فاز وراحوا عليه الصحفيين كما تفضلت الأستاذة أبدأ إيماءات لم يتحدث لأنه لا يهدي اللغة اللي طرح بها السؤال. فلماذا نحن كإعلاميين وكصحفيين نطرح أسئلتنا باللغة اللي يفهموها الآخرين لنسهل عليهم لأننا نحن نبحث عن اللغة نبحث عن المعلومة ونبحث عن القصة. شكرا.
Thank you very much, sir.
That was a heck of a question.
And I understand the reason for you wanting to ask that question in Arabic because, guys, it comes back to you. It comes back to us. In addition to thanking Sheikh Mansour for this festival and congratulating you on hosting it, the gentleman was saying that why is the expectation put on to the jockeys to be multilingual? Why indeed, Liz, as indeed you are, aren't the journalists better prepared when they travel to other countries to watch races? Why are they not better prepared to ask their questions or receive their answers in different languages?
Absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. Oui.
But
you're right, Luke.
But actually, Tony, it does beg the question. I mean, your guys go all over the world following racing. Do you have anybody on the staff that's multilingual?
We have members of staff who have one other language, typically French. But it's a very interesting point that's made. If we have reporters that go to cover the German derby, even the Arc. But obviously English is, for good reason or bad, is the universal language of racing. We can conduct an interview in French after the Arc, but there'll probably be another 15, 20, 30 journalists all around who expect it and want it to be in English as well.
Yeah, and I take that point, but I think the point that's being...
No, but the point is, this is incredible, I have to say this, because you guys all listened to the translation of his question in English.
Yes.
I listened to the translation of his question in French. And
what did he say?
There was no mentioning. The question was totally different to what you got.
I can't believe that.
Because in French, the question was actually, why do journalists ask bad questions?
But what is journalists?
The issue now we discuss. It is not different than we talk about right now, you know. My question related to the issue now we discuss, we talk about it, about contacts, about how to be close to the other people, to communicate with other people. We don't want to blame others, and we have to, to be ready to learn language, to help ourselves, and to make other people's questions or answers easy. Did you get my point?
We get your point.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Well done, big fella.
Where is our second microphone at the moment? Where is our second microphone at the moment? Amanda.
Yes, hello, my name is Amanda Smith. I'm the racing manager for the Arabian Racing Organisation in the UK. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask a question which relates to the very first point that we talked about in this session regarding the coverage of Arabian racing in media. And the media generally, but I guess specifically to the Racing Post being our leading racing publication in the UK. You say you're in the difficult position of sort of deciding between the Arabian racing authorities, as in us and our sponsors, and your general readership, who see that Arabian racing as quite a niche sport. But we have a lot of our races, all our single races, all of our races as part of this festival, they're all in the betting shops and well received by the betting public. So I feel that maybe if there was a little bit more editorial coverage, then the general readership perhaps wouldn't see it as a niche sport. And you as the media generally, not just the Racing Post, I'm not picking on you, but as the media generally are in the perfect position to educate the general racegoer to see that it's not a niche sport.
Yeah.
Tony, you've got the power to help us move forward.
Yeah, to rewind to a point earlier, we were interested in stories, in human interest stories, and the more of those we get and the more we learn about Arab racing and the history and the personalities in Arab racing, the more enthused we are, and then we can enthuse our readership. The corollary to that is, just taking Britain as a very solitary example, there are 9,000 thoroughbred races a year, and that is where we have to direct our energies. It'll be a long time before there are 9,000 Arab races, but there doesn't need to be. There just needs to be probably more of a critical mass and more engagement with us, and that will allow us to see the human interest stories that there are in any racing, Arab racing or thoroughbred racing.
So it's a two-way street. I think we've got time for 2 more questions, perhaps. Tomo, we have a lady at the back with a...
Hi.
Sorry, so there's a lady with a microphone. Nicola.
Hi. I wanted to ask, really, when you're comparing the media and how jockeys behave with journalists, when you look at other sports like football and you look at some of the worst communicators in the world that have become the best, for example, David Beckham, he was always, you know, he was a team, he was part of 11. Alex Ferguson could pick from 11 players every week that he either wanted to use in front of the media or not. When a jockey wins a race, everybody wants to speak to the jockey, so he's forced into limelight. Not only that, he might have the worst ride ever coming in like 25 minutes. It might be life-threatening for him. And you want him to put on a happy, smiley face, talk beyond maybe his owner's wishes, talk beyond perhaps his trainer's wishes, and, you know, and be... what's the word?
Listen, we all agree with you.
He's compromised.
We all agree.
He's compromised for lots of reasons.
But at the same time, we're live at the time. We haven't got a newspaper the following day. We're literally live at the time. Oh, yeah. And the producer's screaming at Tom, I want an interview. Where is it? And that's why we've got to go in. And win, lose, or draw. Don't worry, I know I get upset when you drive and you get cut off or whatever. But you've got to be able to, you're a top sportsman. You should be able to give. And remember, he makes his living from the sport of racing.
Penny?
He does, and he's looking for sponsorship. He's looking for more rides. He's looking, you know, beyond the race that he's just ridden. But his next ride, you don't know what his next ride is. You haven't sat on what he's going to sit on in 25 minutes' time, and the level of expectation that he's got to perform to in front of a nation. You haven't done that.
Penny, you've got a quick comment on that.
I was just going to draw a parallel with another sport which may be helpful. One of the most successful sports in the UK is rowing. And British rowing have recognised the path that their young rowers, the potential rowers, are going to take. And I tell this because they also recognise that when a rower comes off the water, having gone for the Olympic gold or the World Championships or a European Championships, that they are in the same place. They've just lost. They are absolutely exhausted. It is the worst time when you have just competed as an athlete to be talking to the media. But rowing has acknowledged that that is the time the media need to speak to them. So they train their young people and their experienced rowers, and they continue to train them at each level to be able to do it. And that's the absolute key, that there's one of the most successful sports in the United Kingdom have recognised it's very difficult, and no one's arguing with that, but they have dealt with it and are dealing with it.
Thank you, Penny. Fascinating. I didn't know that about rowing. Fascinating. Do we have time to take one final question?
We haven't, because I've got a very good-looking man here called Masood. Come and join us, Masood, because we're live on stage. Could you give him a big round of applause? He presents every programme. Come there, big fella. Come to the front. This is the man who opens the show and closes it, and it's your microphone, isn't it?
Exactly. Thank you very much, Tomo. And it was very nice at the first day, and a lot of speeches and a lot of nice issues you talk about, and we had you on air. And wish you best of luck also tomorrow with the last and the second day. And wish you best of luck, Tomo. I think you have the time to gather and take the photos, and then we are done.
And will you tell everybody not to be late in the morning?
Yeah, exactly. No, everybody will be sharp at 9:30. Yeah, تفضلي. بس هيك رب يكون سريع لأن
Okay, I have a question from Yasser Mabrouk, who is watching us right now from his home. And thank you, Yasser. The questions to the panel: would you have the same set of mind interviewing an experienced jockey and an apprentice jockey?
Would you have the same?
Yes. would it be the same questions? For example, I think he would have.
So
I can answer that. I
yes,
can answer that
because
from my point of view.
you have done both.
No, I will completely.
It's a very smart question.
Yes, I would like to think that I would have enough experience to make the difference between an experienced jockey and someone who is lacking experience, a young jockey. However, in the heat of the moment, if it's a big race, would I be really putting a different question forward? To be honest, I doubt it. And I was going to make this point early on. You know, we as journalists, we are not unfallible and we are not perfect. And we also make mistakes. You know, there can be no doubt about that. And there are also journalists who might not be very nice, who might not be very sensitive, who might not be thinking about the bigger picture. As I said, I'm not saying we are God and you'll have to answer to us. That's not the point. But all again, what I would say is just give us a little answer and give us the little help. We want to help you. If you can help us, that's great. But would I ask the same question? I would think, I would hope I would take it into account. But I'm not sure that I or everyone else always would. I don't know. How about you? I mean, would you?
Raise
your voice. Am I right?
You would hope that
if you had Gianni winning.
Yeah, you would hope.
Would it be the same like Frankie Dettori is winning? Would you give Gianni the same?
Only if he did a flying dismount.
No, if he won. No, I'm sorry. He won in Newbury, and Philip maybe asked him one question.
Yeah.
On Racing UK that day, but that was it.
Yeah.
When Frankie Dettori wins, he wins the big. All the people goes to his interview. So this was a very good question from Yasser to specify that also you need to work harder to help these boys and girls because it's you who make them self-confident to grow bigger and to have more, not to be scared from media and not to be closer to you. Because when you put a distance being an apprentice or an amateur, not a professional, I'm not talking professionals, this is a big gap between the media and between the main small young apprentices and amateurs.
And that, Laura, that we should treat them with the same gravity and the same respect.
That's why we are all here. These boys and girls deserve a big clap from all of us because they count on you and us to support them.
That's it. That's a great way to finish. Thank you very much indeed. Philip, superb. Panel outstanding as always. Could we all stand for a photograph? And while we're standing, can I say thank you to all of you. You are now looking forward to a lovely evening by the swimming pool, and we'll see you here tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And I'm counting the last one to get in, you'll be in big trouble. Enjoy yourselves, and ladies and gentlemen, let's hand back to Masood to say goodbye.
Thank you very much, Tomo. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. مشاهدينا الكرام، وصلنا معكم طبعا ختام البث الحي والمباشر. مشاهدينا الكرام هنا من فندق المانغروف أنانترا. مشاهدينا الكرام، طبعا كان اليوم الأول من انطلاق مؤتمر الشيخة فاطمة بنت مبارك للتدريب والتعليم. كانت هناك مشاهدينا الكرام 3 جلسات. الجلسة الأولى كانت تحت عنوان تدريب الفرسان عالميا وتفادي الإصابات من الساعة 10:30 وحتى 12. أما الجلسة الثانية مشاهدينا الكرام كانت الوصول بالفرسان لأعلى المستويات من الساعة 1:30 وحتى 3. أما الجلسة الثالثة والأخيرة كانت بعنوان المحور الرئيسي كان هو صناعة العلاقات العامة والإعلام والتدريب من 3:15 وحتى الآن. مشاهدينا الكرام، نتمنى أن نكون قد وفقنا إلى نقل هذا البث والحي والمباشر. غدا سوف يكون اليوم الثاني من هذا المؤتمر، مؤتمر الشيخة فاطمة بنت مبارك للتدريب والتعليم. في الختام تقبلوا تحياتي أخوكم محمد سالم والأستاذ المعد أصلا محمد سالم، وتقبلوا تحيات أيضا رولاند ضو وريمون ضو الذين أخرجوا على هذه الفترة، وإلى اللقاء.